national security and our geopolitical position from Bitcoin are positive and quite strong if we take advantage of our unique position at the moment. And so I've articulated that in a number of different forms, long white papers. I think the key thrust of my argument has been, one, like the legacy monetary financial system that we constructed sort of the post-war era and really sort of fine-tuned in the last 50 years, sort of like all sorts of systems, they start off being quite well optimized for a certain geopolitical status quo, a certain arrangement of trade and financial flows. And they get sort of optimized for that set of arrangements, and they accrue lots of power to the system that set them up. And that's sort of the system that we've been running for the last 50 years. And it's, I think, progressively reached a point of diminishing marginal returns, and in fact now probably creating increasing marginal costs on our overall global position and our domestic stability, in the sense that we have essentially sold off our manufacturing base. We no longer have a defense industrial capacity to credibly deter our great power adversaries. That's a direct downstream function of the fact that we effectively have to print debt to supply global demand. That's a result of us running structural trade and capital account deficits, and our adversaries accumulate dollars and reinvest them historically into our debt. And that mechanism, that sort of global dollar recycling, is led to the benefit of our fire sector and our tech sector, but has sort of systematically atrophied sort of the core elements of domestic manufacturing and industrial power that you really need to have if you get into global conflict. And so that's increasingly seen as a risk, an acute risk in the defense intelligence communities. But that's a hard sort of thing to unwind. The second is, so that's like essentially the legacy system is an acute vulnerability, and it's growing as a vulnerability. It's in creating acute sort of fragilities in our debt markets that our policymakers essentially have to keep sort of scrambling to contain, and that distracts our strategic attention. The second is our adversaries are really not fighting to first order a global physical conflict, although there's proxy wars. The main argument is that they're fighting essentially a digital network competition. And the global economy is effectively a digital set of systems, whether it's the financial systems, the computing systems, other communication systems. And it's about capturing sort of key nodes in that global system, and those rapidly changing sort of topology of those global networks is where sort of the front lines of global competition reside. And so it's not really a matter of physical territory to first order. It's about capturing sort of strategic advantage over core nodes in an emerging set of digital systems that are now increasingly interlinked between value, energy, and communication. And those are the systems that are going to determine who sort of maintains dominance in the next 10, 20 years. And I think if we just sort of pretend that these changes aren't happening, and we sort of just double down on sort of the legacy systems that we've rode to global dominance on, that we're exposing ourselves to an acute risk of being rug pulled strategically in the next 5 or 10 years. And that is something that doesn't happen. It's hard to sort of get policymakers to think about those changes because they sort of start in the margins. They seem easy to dismiss. They seem like flashes in a pan or sort of somewhat trivial peripheral issues until they're not. And that's I think the lesson of global power politics is that these changes can accrue and get momentum, and then they're sort of hard to stop unless you've seen ahead. So that's what I've talked about in terms of our existing system is leading to and has caused strategic vulnerabilities. Our adversaries are sort of jumping ahead to try to capture strategic advantage of these emerging digital networks. And unless we recognize that this is an inflection point, and we just double down on our existing systems, which are increasingly fragile and require ever more effort to sustain, we're not in a good position to counter authoritarian objectives around the world. So that's the way I sort of frame it in terms of Bitcoin and dollar-based stablecoins, as essentially helping to buttress and transform, but in a more gradual form, a global system that is still open, is still fundamentally liberal, is still oriented towards sort of the core values that America at least holds up for itself historically in terms of freedom, property value, property rights, human rights, et cetera. So that's kind of the stakes, and I think we're going to see that unfold in the next few years. So how we sort of set our political and our geopolitical orientation to those emerging systems whether we're actively hostile to them, and allow folks like the Emirates or the Singaporeans or Hong Kong to become kind of the dominant nodes in those emerging networks, or whether we retain our place in those emerging systems and then can compete effectively in a shifting global system.
This episode was presented by River. River is the best, most secure place to buy Bitcoin in the United States. Go to river.com/TFTC, set up an account today. You'll be able to DCA into Bitcoin without paying any fees. You'll be able to give people Bitcoin via River links. You'll be able to send and receive Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, and you'll be able to set limit orders. If you want to buy Bitcoin at a particular price, below or above where it is now, you can set orders to buy Bitcoin when it hits that price. Go to river.com/TFTC and set up your account today.